Your number one station for talk. 99.3 Nigeria Info.
Lagos, you're listening to 99.3 Nigeria Info. I'm Sandra Ezekwesili. It's 2 minutes past 5, 3 minutes now, actually, past 5. And my big question, the big question on everyone's minds, to be honest with you, is the Twitter ban legal? That's number one. And number two, will it last? Is the ban legal? And will it last? It's the biggest story in Nigeria today, so we're continuing our conversation from the big weekend. Yesterday's big hard fact. According to StatCounter, 39.8% of Nigerian internet users were on Twitter. StatCounter says that 39.8% of Nigerian internet users were on Twitter. That's 4 in 10 internet users. And of course, many of them are just not, they are not just casual users. Many are using the app for business. Many are using the app for work. Then, of course, there are those who use the app to get and share information. There are those who use the app for different, numerous activities. So for the people who criticize this ban, Twitter is an essential tool for freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, ease of doing business. But for those who support the government and the government itself, they say that Twitter has served as an avenue for misinformation and incitement. So that's what we're talking about for the next few minutes. Joining us to have this conversation is people who are very knowledgeable on the subject. Adeboye Adegoke is the senior program manager at Paradigm Initiative. He's also a digital inclusion activist. Adeboye, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we're also expecting Kolawole from Serap. He's a deputy director at Serap. He was supposed to be here on the show with us on the big weekend, but unfortunately couldn't join us. But he's already standing by via the phone lines, and he'll be joining any second now. And then, of course, we've got Nonso Anyasi. Nonso Anyasi is a lawyer who works at the intersection where tech and the law and human rights meet. And he'll be joining us in a few minutes as well to have this conversation with us. But we have Adeboye here. So let's start with Adeboye, right? Before we get all these other guests to join in on the conversation. Now, I mentioned, Adeboye, the large percentage of Nigerian internet users who are on Twitter. How has Twitter affected digital inclusion in Nigeria? What types of economic and civic activities has Twitter helped grow?
Yeah, it's quite it's a quite useful space for people and for things. Paradigm Initiative had put out a statement earlier, highlighting that the ban means a lot of things, from basic human rights up to also socio-economic rights. And I think your question has come from the angle of socio-economic rights.
Right.
In terms of people using Twitter for economic purposes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now Twitter has become a space, just like other, digital or social companies, by ability to what they do, whether they sell, whether they offer a service. We have this popular slogan that people use on Twitter, my customer be on your timeline.
Right.
Now, it's very important for Nigerians, especially young Nigerians who either cannot raise the capital they need to rent a shop, do business in the traditional way, mm-hmm. or to get a job, a traditional job, 9-to-5 kind of job. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are getting by just because they have a presence on Twitter.
Right.
People advertising their business. I've just working on a research. Work with me on that research who helped me as a data collector. Right. I came across her on Twitter because she was advertising herself and say, I collect data, I can support your research. I saw her, I messaged her, and we worked. That is how significant and important that Twitter has been to, the economics of individuals to the economics of Nigerians, especially young people. Young people are leveraging that platform massively for some kind of economic survival or some kind of economic advantage. And when you consider the unemployment numbers in this country, then you would see clearly why such platform is very key. I think Nigerian government is shooting itself in the leg by the decision it has made, because clearly the government cannot provide all the jobs. It's clear that Nigerians have kind of adapted to a kind of life whereby you do practically everything for yourself. And one of those things people are doing for themselves is that if the country cannot offer me a clear path to employment, even after I've gone to school and had all the degrees, people are trying a lot to help themselves. And one of the platforms which, in fact, if not the most significant platform that people are using, are social media platforms. And Twitter will rank significantly in that context. So that is the significance of Twitter for businesses, for the economy, especially at the individual level. And of course, the micro makes up the macro, right? So even at the macro level, as this also has economic significance. But let's even start it from the micro level. A lot of people will be denied opportunity. Even some of us that are professionals. I mean, a lot of people reach out to us because they saw our profile and they think the kind of work we do, they think is relevant. I mean, you saw me on Twitter, for example.
I did. I saw you on Twitter
before. I'm sure you've never heard about me before.
Yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of professionals are thriving through Twitter. A lot of people get job offers through Twitter. A lot of people communicate what they do through Twitter. Even government communicate policies, principles. A lot of us get information from the NCDC on the coronavirus, pandemic, the measures that the government is implementing. We get it through Twitter. So that platform is just too significant from an economic perspective for Nigeria and for Nigerians.
Now, we have Nonso Anyansi, who has joined us on the call now. Kolawole Oluwadare is also here. Kolawole, thank you for finally joining us on Hard Facts.
Thank you very much.
And also, Nonso, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right, Lagos, let's keep the conversation going. We'd like to hear from you as well. Nonso, now that you're here, I have to ask you, on the one hand, you have the Attorney General saying that anybody who uses Twitter will be prosecuted. On the other hand, you have the Nigerian Bar Association and the Minority Caucus of the House of Reps saying that this ban violates the Constitution. How are we ending up with such different interpretations on the legality of this move, Nonso?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think the position taken by the Nigerian Bar Association and the minority leader of the House of Assembly, or the House of Reps rather, is the true and correct position. Okay. Because if you look at the provisions of Section 36 sub 12 of the Constitution, it states that no person shall be prosecuted or convicted or tried for any offense which is not contained in a written law that must have been passed by either the National Assembly or the House of Assembly of a state. So this entire issue, this entire fiasco involving the Twitter ban started on Friday. It was on Friday that we saw an executive memo coming from the Ministry of Information and Culture stating that the operations of Twitter had been banned and suspended in Nigeria. If that memo or that directive came from the Ministry of Information and Culture, which is under the executive arm of government, the Minister for Information is not a member of the National Assembly. He doesn't have the powers to make laws. Even the president of this country lacks the powers to make laws. It is only the National Assembly that can make a law via which any Nigerian or any person at all can be arrested, tried, or prosecuted for any offense. So the position right now is that the current ban on Twitter is not an illegality. It is not a crime. So nobody can be legally prosecuted, arrested, or tried for using Twitter in Nigeria. That is the simple answer to the question.
To your mind, what's the acceptable process for the executive if it wants to investigate and prove that an online platform is causing a national security breach and to take action against that platform? No, so.
If the executive arm of government wants to do what it has done, it is meant to abide by the rule of law.
Right.
In our system of government, we have what is called separation of powers. The essence of separation of powers is that governmental powers has been divided amongst the three arms of government.
Right.
Although it is quite unfortunate that the judiciary has been on strike for about 3 months now, so the judiciary has been rendered impotent for now. But if the executive actually wanted to achieve what it has done via a legal or via a legal means,
Right.
it could have petitioned or written a bill or asked the National Assembly to pass a law which would have done what it did. As it stands, the executive arm of government, namely the Ministry of Information and Culture, and also the Ministry for Communications and Digital Economy, which are the two ministries that are responsible for this entire issue, they actually have the powers to regulate anything that has to do with information in Nigeria,
right,
or anything that has to do with communications. So for information, access to information, for verifying the truth of information that we have out there on social media, is actually within the purview of the Ministry of Information. But the ministry can only act within the powers that it has. And by doing so, it can only regulate information that is out there in the social media as long as that regulation is in conformity with the provisions of the Constitution.
Right.
For example, if there is a false news that is threatening the sovereignty or the security of the nation, the executive arm of government can come in to put an end to the further dissemination of that information. This is covered by Section 45 of the Constitution.
Okay.
But in this case, the Ministry of Information has not identified any particular section or any particular thing on Twitter which is contravening the provisions of the Constitution or which has constituted a security challenge to Nigeria. It just made a blanket ban. And by making that blanket ban, so many lawful activities have been affected. There are many businesses that we have on Twitter. Many people are carrying out their businesses on Twitter that have been affected. And so because of this, the executive arm of government has actually infringed on the fundamental rights of almost every Nigerian who has a Twitter account, and even foreign nationals who also operate or who have anything to do with Nigerians on Twitter.
And that brings me to Serap, because Kolawole wants, not Kolawole now, Serap wants to approach the courts because of this. Tell me, Kolawole, what are some of the things you're hoping to pray the court?
Thank you very much, Sandra. I believe you are referring to the reviews you are going to ask from the court.
Yes.
Courts to set aside the so-called ban or suspension, whatever name it's called.
Oh, so we're struggling to hear you. I don't know if you're using a hands-free device. You're sounding very far away from your phone.
Can you hear me now?
We were hearing you before, but you were sounding very hollow.
Hello, can you hear me now?
This is much better, much clearer. Go ahead.
Okay. I said to start with, asking the court to declare the ban or suspension as unlawful, and asking that the orders given by the minister be set aside. And that is clear enough, like Mr. Nanto has said. The legal arguments are well known and they are clear on the face of it. So it's very hard to find the court refusing to do such orders.
It's very. Say it again. I didn't catch that last part.
It's going to be very hard to find the court refusing to grant the order
that Serap is going to court with. All right. Now, the presidency says that the ban was a response to Twitter's refusal to check fake news and divisive rhetoric. Is there a case to be made here that Twitter needs to be more proactive in handling offensive or dangerous speech coming from Nigerian citizens in the way that they handled that tweet from the president, Kolawole?
Again, this is within the context of the side we want to look at it from.
Okay.
The same freedom of expression that Nigerians enjoy, that including the president and the citizen of Nigeria enjoys. Also, the law also gives Twitter as a private enterprise some rights, and that includes regulating the platform it operates. And there are community rules that guide the operation of people who want to use Twitter. And if, for any reason, any individual, including countries, feel that those rules are either lopsided as seen, or in its application, there are ways to go about it. So saying that Twitter allows some tweets for whatever reason, and you would understand that for different countries and different individuals in countries, for instance, looking at Nigeria, will have different views to whether the rules are good or bad or applied justifiably or not. And so there is always that